I'm utterly furious Labor blocked harder mandatory sentencing laws for child sex offenders. Why did Labor do that? Because it was a Liberal initiative.
No, that's not true.
Well, hang on. This is the feedback you're asking for. Okay, it's worth listening to. We need a bipartisan approach to these sorts of issues that protect our most vulnerable. If Labor had voted this new legislation in, you would have earned more respect by the voters to do the right thing, to do your bloody job, being a public servant and protect our children. This is what the people wanted. End quote. This is the feedback you're getting on your own Facebook page.
Mandatory minimum sentences don't stop abuse.
You can keep chanting that until the cows come home.
But it's true.
But a person who is an offender who's in jail for 4 years, as opposed to 6 months, has 3.5 years of not molesting children.
G'day everyone, Anattack76 here with some anxious Aussie commentary, and it seems Labor have given me the opportunity to demonstrate once again that we do have elements in the left who are supporting pedophilia, if not supporting it, then finding excuses for it rather than protecting our children. So this has been circulating on Facebook for the last couple of weeks. Last night it popped up in my feed again, which is just a screenshot of the media release, and someone had tried to say that it was fake. So I actually went to the Honourable Michael Keenan MP's website to find that for you. Labor refuses to back stronger penalties for pedophiles. Labor has tonight confirmed it will not support mandatory jail for child sex offenders. This means predators may not even spend one day behind bars. The coalition government's proposed reforms would be the toughest crackdown on child sex offenders in a generation, but Labor has put children across the nation at risk by opposing mandatory minimum sentences for these heinous crimes. Current sentencing practices for Commonwealth child sex offences often result in manifestly inadequate sentences which do not sufficiently recognise the harm suffered to child victims. Astonishingly, since 2012, only 58.7% of convicted Commonwealth child sex offenders received a term of imprisonment. For those who did, the most common period of actual imprisonment was just 6 months. This is not acceptable. Labor's hypocrisy is breathtaking. Their Attorney General in 2010 said of people smugglers, the use of mandatory minimum penalties reflects the seriousness of the activity being prosecuted. If a mandatory minimum sentence was appropriate for people smugglers, why shouldn't the same principle apply to pedophiles? Labor's erratic approach to suit the political interests of the day is a threat to community safety. Our child sex offender reforms are based on the strong advice of our law enforcement agencies and will better protect children from sexual abuse. A vote against these reforms is a vote to allow more pedophiles into the community. That talk with Tasmania was actually from in June, I believe it was, and this media release is only just out now for the Commonwealth one. So I really think Labor has some questions to answer there as to what exactly their position is on child protection, particularly when it comes to the protection of children's right to grow and develop at their own pace, because their innocence is being stolen from them right now, and between the school programs being pushed and this sort of thing, our kids have no hope. Every parent should be furious about this. Our laws used to be a lot stronger when it came to child protection, and if you go and spend a bit of time in the Osley files, which isn't a pleasant experience looking up these ones, but you'll notice every other case is appealed and most of the appeals are successful, whether the sentence is reduced or they're let out completely. And I did actually put some other figures that come from the Royal Commission into Institutional Abuse, Corruption Commissions and things like that in the first Pedos Australia Forgot videos, which I will link in the description of this one for everybody. But what you're looking at on the screen now is just a basic search about sentences reduced. That's the first page. And you can see the variety of dates that are just on that one page. And for some reason, this stuff is just not being reported in the way it should be. Right now, we are seeing people who've said or done something people consider offensive spending more time in jail and paying higher financial penalties than people who have seriously harmed a child. Everyone who thinks that they are a human rights advocate should really think hard about that and the way excuses and exceptions are being applied to these sorts of crimes. So I went and found this article just to demonstrate how much of a problem this is in our system. A convicted child sex offender successfully appeals their conviction or sentence every 5 days in Australia, with the average sentence slashed by at least 1/5. A news.com.au investigation can reveal that of 145 appeals involving child sex offenders heard in 2008, 27 people had convictions quashed and 41 had their sentences reduced. Those figures do not include cases where more than two offenders were involved. Counsellors have criticised the high success rate of appeals, with one claiming the court system was basically re-abusing children. Now, as I said, go and check the Osley files. These figures are not getting any better. If anything, they are getting worse. In Queensland alone, 10 child sex convictions were overturned by judges of the Supreme Court of Appeal last year, and jail time was slashed by an average of 34%. In Victoria, the Supreme Court of Appeal quashed 7 convictions and reduced sentences by nearly 30%. Its New South Wales counterpart overturned 5 convictions, and the average sentence was cut by 21%. 4 South Australians also walked off their convictions on appeal. In one appeal heard in Queensland, a woman sentenced to 3.5 years for raping her 8-year-old daughter had her conviction quashed because the evidence of the alleged victim, aged 10 at the time of the trial, was not sufficient. The girl had said she was in a dreamlike state when her mother allegedly entered her bedroom, and I'm not going to keep reading that. Psychologist Do Tukey has counselled children who have seen their abusers walk free from court, said the impact of successful appeals on victims was devastating. They feel like they've done something wrong, that it's their fault and that they shouldn't have told anyone, Dr Tukey, CEO of Australian Childhood Foundation, told news.com.au. It really shakes their self-confidence and self-esteem. Often the perpetrator will reapply for access to these kids. Children end up having contact, and sometimes unsupervised contact, with these people. And I'll link the rest of that one below. As I said, none of these things have changed, but I will add this part. A child needed to know that the person who abused them was behind bars, and the longer it took for that to happen, the more traumatising it became, he said. They're left in limbo. To a child, this is not something they understand. Australia's most notorious pedophile, Robert Dolly Dunn, had his sentence slashed by 1/3, despite being convicted of 24 sex offences and 3 drug charges. In 2004, the New South Wales Court of Appeal slashed Dunn's maximum jail term by 10 years. He was originally sentenced to 30 years imprisonment. So I think it's pretty clear there's a real problem in our justice system, and the victims in this case are the children.
Andrew, I just had a feeling that there was something wrong. And I can't explain that to you, to be quite honest. It was just, maybe it was intuition, I'm not sure. And it was connected to his laptop. So I broke into his laptop. And what I found was not what I expected at all.
That we will proceed to prosecution.
I find them absolutely revolting. Kids deserve to have the innocence of their childhood protected.
Freedom is a very precious thing. And before we have policemen tramping through art galleries, tramping through libraries, we've got to think. Freedom is what makes this country great.
Of a suspected child rapist in WA has helped to expose a nationwide pedophile ring. Channel 9 reporter Ben McCormack is allegedly a member of the group. Mr McCormack was arrested last month. Live to 7 News reporter Jordan Cutts at Police HQ. Jordan, that arrest happened after WA Police gained access to the ring's membership list.
Matt, it did, and what it meant for WA Police is that they were able to delve into phone records, computer files and websites. It basically gave them access to see how this alleged child rapist was communicating with other members around the country who were also part of this secret pedophile ring. Now, that alleged child rapist was arrested and now has 35 charges against him, including child rape and child pornography offences. From that arrest, though, the investigation really gained momentum. WA Police got an idea who was part of this ring within the state. A Catholic primary school teacher is also believed to have been caught up in it. The information gained from WA Police also led to a number of arrests over east, including one very high-profile arrest. We saw that with Channel 9, a current affair reporter Ben McCormack, who's accused of sending child pornography. Now, heading up this inquiry into the suspected pedophile ring is the Joint Anti-Child Exploitation Team.
And unfortunately, Mr. McCormack isn't the only one to have been caught out in our commercial media industry, but we've also had our historical cases like Rolf Harris, and the ABC has got its own scandal going back decades around pedophilia. This story comes from the Media Watchdog, which features in The Australian, and I'm just going to give you their most recent episode of this, but we may actually go through their whole story that they've got, the ABC and pedophilia, a timeline another day. The managing director exhibits ignorance about ABC's historic child sex abuse case at Senate estimates. This week, the Hansard of the Senate Estimates Environment and Communications was released, covering the hearings on the ABC held on Tuesday, the 24th of October 2017. As avid readers are aware, the ABC, from the managing director down to journalists and producers, is in denial concerning the public broadcaster's very own historical child abuse case. On the 13th of June 2017, former ABC TV producer John Stevens pleaded guilty at District Court in Gosford to having sexually assaulted a 14-year-old male ABC casual employee while on an ABC assignment near Gosford in 1981. John Stevens appeared before the District Court on the 15th of June 2017 and again on the 13th of September 2017. The ABC did not report the first case. It reported the second case on One News Bulletin only at 1 p.m. before dumping the story completely. For a reminder of the details of the ABC's denial into the John Stevens case, please see their article, which I will link below, or as I said, we may actually go through that another time. On the 24th of October 2017, Senator Erica Betts directed questions to Michelle Guthrie, ABC Managing Director and Editor-in-Chief, and Alan Sunderland, ABC Editorial Director. Mr. Sunderland provided no explanation as to why the ABC reported the John Stevens conviction only once on One News Bulletin, the 1 p.m. bulletin on the 13th of December 2017. The ABC's editorial director ignored Senator Abbott's statement that the ABC had covered other historical child sex offences within other institutions. Ms. Guthrie told the Senate that she could not answer as to when the ABC first became aware of the allegation against John Stevens. Also, Ms. Guthrie could not provide information about the employment status of Stevens at the time of the offence or that of the 14-year-old boy. In other words, 4 months after the ABC became aware of John Stevens' conviction, the ABC's managing director could not answer Senator Abbott's straightforward questions about the case and had to take them on notice. Michelle Guthrie did say the ABC is investigating the issue. However, the ABC managing director declined to say whether the ABC has adopted a duty of care to Stevens' victim, who is reported to be destitute and living in a van. Media Watchdog will continue to keep readers informed about the case. And he's just got a little note here that the ABC's star reporter Lewis Milligan has not covered the John Stevens case on the 7:30 program or publicly expressed interest in the plight of his victim. Well, surprise. And we're not surprised. This is the ABC we're talking about. So I'm going to leave you with Tasmania Talks with Brian Carlton and his talk to the opposition leader down there, the Labor leader, Rebecca White. I think you'll really enjoy listening to her squirm. He really gives her a good go. I think I'm going to listen to Tasmania Talks a little bit more in the future because I like the man's style. Just remember, they're not always going to report the facts, and sometimes we need to dig those up ourselves. There is a real push to sexualise our children, and there are people out there who are quite happy to cooperate with those people that would see this happen. Thanks for listening.
Welcome to Taz Talks again. How you going?
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me. Good.
It's my opinion, and I would argue the opinion of the majority of people listening to this show, and indeed the majority of people who contacted me, the majority of people who've logged in on the on our Facebook page, on our website, indeed on your Facebook page. You've made a massive, massive error knocking back the minimum mandatory sentences for child sex offences. This is a very, very bad misstep and could well cost you the election.
Well, in the first instance, I want to make it really clear that the Labor Party completely supports increasing penalties for people who abuse children. There's absolutely no place in our society for that.
Why vote against them?
Well, the argument that we voted against it, which blocked the bill, it needs to be also considered in context that we had 2 votes out of 15. So there were other members of the upper house
Yes, but your
who
vote,
voted against it.
had you voted with the government, the legislation would have passed.
The argument, I talked about this with you off air. As politicians, we have to listen to the evidence. I'm not an expert criminologist. None of us are. We need to make sure that we consider the evidence and on the weight of that make laws so that they can be appropriately applied by our courts. Mandatory minimum sentences on the weight of evidence that we heard from the experts indicates that they don't prevent crimes against children, but they can also have some perverse outcomes or in fact don't work. We have to make laws that provide good legislation. Courts assess on the basis of evidence and fact the individual circumstances of the crimes, because as much as we'd like to make laws that apply to the whole of society, one size does not fit all. And that's why we have courts who can hear the individual circumstances and the facts and make decisions. It is already a crime to abuse a child, and so it should be. And there are already penalties that apply, including jail, and that is absolutely right. I understand that the community has, a fierce association with this. As a mother, of course, we want to protect our babies. We are like fierce tigers and lions trying to protect them.
You had an opportunity to, again, I make the point,
things.
you had an opportunity to do exactly that. Because any logical person, and most of the people who listen to this show are reasonably logical, and I like to consider myself a reasonably logical person too. Let me just give you the example that I raised with your Shadow Attorney General when she called in unannounced yesterday, Lara Gidding. The case of a 70-plus-year-old man who committed 2 offences against a 5-year-old on 2 separate occasions and was given a 6-month jail term because he was considered too old to go to jail. Now, clearly, people hear that and go, oh, come on. Come on, the guy's perfectly capable of committing sexual offences against a child, but he's not capable of going to prison for it for more than 6 months.
I'm not going to defend him.
People are outraged. But Lara Gidding, your Attorney General, when she rang up yesterday said, I need to see the detail of the case. Nobody needs to see the detail of that case to know that that's inappropriate.
It is inappropriate. I agree with you. I'm not going to defend him.
This is what the law that you knocked back in Parliament would have fixed.
But what it also does, when you apply a broad-based law like that, and someone like that, I agree, that's not an appropriate penalty. And
but this is the stuff. Rebecca, with respect, we've been listening to the bloody experts for 25 years on this issue, and we've got 75-year-old men who can molest 5-year-olds walking out of jail after 6 months because the judiciary think that he's too old to go there. This is exactly the kind of thing people arc up about. You had an opportunity to fix it, and you failed.
Well, we are engaged with the sector about how we can increase the penalties, because I agree that's not appropriate. It's not in keeping with community
Well, why not pass this legislation, then continue to have the dialogue, so that we're at least protecting kids in the interim? Because if that old man's in jail for 4 years, there's 3.5 years he's not out molesting other children.
The reason that we didn't support it is because the Labor Party doesn't support mandatory sentences.
Oh, so it's a principle, is it?
But can I explain in the context of this legislation? If you've got a circumstance where you've got one size fits all, you can have perverse outcomes whereby... Give me an example of a perverse outcome. Please do. You've got high school sweethearts. They're in a relationship. They're having a sexual relationship, and then one of them turns 18 or 19. Yep. And therefore, technically, it's statutory rape. That person under this law, because you apply mandatory sentences, goes to jail for 2 or 4 years.
No, that's not true. That's not true. That is nonsense. Absolute nonsense.
Explain to me why you think that's nonsense.
Because there are aggravating circumstances. If you read each of these... Have you actually read the legislation?
Yes.
You have. Can I read it again live for the audience so we all know what we're talking about? 4 years in jail for the crime of rape where a victim is under 17 years. 4 years in jail for maintaining a sexual relationship with a young person where there are aggravating circumstances and rape. 3 years in jail for the crime of maintaining a sexual relationship with a young person where there are aggravating circumstances. And 2 years in jail for the crime of sexual intercourse with a young person where there are aggravating circumstances. The example you gave me, there are no aggravating circumstances. That would not apply.
There would be in circumstances, and we're talking hypothetically, but there would be in circumstances, hypothetically, where you had a vexatious incident. So you have a breakdown of that relationship, and then somebody makes the complaint. So then the court would not have discretion. They would have to apply the mandatory minimum sentence, and that person would go to jail. And that's why we have a problem with mandatory sentencing, is because the court can't, on the weight of evidence before them and the facts presented in a case, make a decision about the sentence appropriate to the crime. Because every crime is different. Every circumstance is different.
Again,
you can't apply a one-size-fits-all.
The focus here is on the perpetrator.